I've released a few videos and articles recently about Washington State Governor Inslee and AG Bob Ferguson's violent sex predator neighborhood release scheme. Now, this video provides an update with more information that we have since been able to collect. And I'm sorry, but this story only gets worse. But you need to hear it regardless of where you live. We can't bury our head in the sand and pretend that this isn't happening. And we can't fix anything if we do that. So this isn't just a Washington State story. This insane policy, unfortunately, is probably coming to you regardless of where you live. So before I go any further, I just want to remind everyone that if you like this video, please remember to like, share, and subscribe down below. It doesn't cost you anything, but it does help our channel get more visibility on videos like this. And also, if you have any comments, you disagree with me, you think I'm totally wrong, or you have some inside information that everybody should know, please feel free to leave those comments below. I do read them all, and I try to respond to most of them when I can. Okay, now I produced the last two videos about Governor Inslee's shocking program to take the worst of the worst designated violent sex predators from where they're currently located on the secure, isolated island lockup facility on McNeil Island, and instead dump them into homes located in neighborhoods or rural communities throughout Washington State. Now, I have more information and further updates, and as I said before, we're generally getting this information from records requests and from state and other government agencies, as well as from inside sources within those agencies where people who are far more honest than the upper management they work for, of course, they're clearly sick and disgusted by this policy that's currently being implemented by Jay Inslee and apparently sponsored by most elected Democrats in Washington State. Now, if you think anyone in senior levels of government is watching out for you, this will probably be a shocking story to hear. Or you can just pretend it isn't happening and go back to playing Candy Crush on your phone. That would probably be less stressful and certainly less triggering than hearing the truth. Now, speaking about the truth, let's talk about money and how much of your tax dollars Inslee plans to pay these kind of shady nonprofit and for-profit companies to launch these violent sex predators into your neighborhood. Now, by the way, I call them violent sex predators because that is the official designation given to them by the state of Washington. It isn't just a catchy title. We're not just talking about run-of-the-mill sex offenders being released back into your community. That actually happens every day. Currently, there's over 22,000 convicted sex offenders living throughout Washington State after they've been released from their prison sentences. I'm sure many of them live next to you already. But we only know that number because ever since the Community Protection Act of 1990, the state has been forced to reveal this information. Before that, it was actually always a mystery. And if you live in a red state, I encourage you to get up to speed on this issue because you have plenty of these guys living near you as well. But that's not what this story's about. We are focused exclusively on the worst of the worst that our state has ever caught and convicted and formally designated as violent sex predators, almost certain to reoffend after they are released. According to statements from McNeil Island, about 60% of them are pedophiles, and a good number of these guys were determined to be so mentally unstable they couldn't even stand trial for their original crimes. So Governor Inslee, AG Ferguson, and the Democrats who sponsored legislation in 2021 to drop these guys into our communities, they decided that that was the best policy. So I discussed that in more detail in my earlier videos, and I've also linked to them down below. I'd encourage you to watch them. Now, back to the money. Since my last video, I finally got a copy of the first contract with Supreme Living, which is the local for-profit group run by Angela Rinaldo here in Thurston County. Now, this one is for her proposed release site at a rural house located between the city of Tenino and the city of Tumwater in South Thurston County. Now, according to the terms of that contract and the fee schedule that's attached, and you can download it for yourself, I've linked it down below, she plans to collect a minimum of $38,513.50 per month for each violent sex predator that she gets. Now, it's close to $500,000 a year. If she actually fills the building up with the capacity of 5 violent sex predators, as she's projected, then she'll be collecting over $107,858.50 per year, which is just under $1.3 million. Now, for that kind of cash, people are willing to do a lot. And obviously, they're willing to overlook the ugly problems with the program. And this appears to be true pretty much at all levels. Now, if you remember from my earlier videos when Angela Rinaldo, the former DSHS employee who claims to have represented abuse victims for so many years in her previous job at DSHS, and who has now become an advocate and supporter of violent sex predators with her Supreme Living facility, well, she appears to have a problem telling the truth about much of anything. It does appear that she's doing this for the money, and it is a big pile of cash that she plans to rake in. So remember, I think she was fairly truthful about that. She described this as a kind of a property play, and she has investors who've helped her purchase this $1.1 million house, and they stuff it with violent sex predators, collect mad money, and then presumably make bank when they sell the house in the future. All this, of course, is funded by the taxpayer, you and I. Now, I'll confess, I thought the dollar amounts that insiders at the state agencies that were overseeing this program right now, which the Washington State Department of Social and Health Services oversees, I had insiders there report to me what sounded like just crazy amounts of cash to house these predators. And I was hesitant to report the numbers that they told me, which is why I waited until now when I actually had a sample contract in hand. Now, if anything, the information these insiders were giving me was substantially understating the cash that the state is willing to and prepared actually to kick out as part of the scheme. Now, part of what makes this so absurd is that the state is preparing to spend twice as much or more on launching these predators into our community than they currently spend at McNeil Island to house these guys in a secure, isolated, and properly supervised facility. And remember the attempts by the Guardian newspaper and these other news outlets over the past years to kind of soft pedal the image of these violent sex predators has always quoted the state as complaining about how much it costs to run. So now, in order to apparently save the money, that same group of politicians and bureaucrats plan to double their costs. And instead of keeping the community safe from their predation of these guys, the state is planning to create scenarios throughout the state where more future victims are almost certainly going to be created. Now, after I launched my last video on this subject, Inslee was actually confronted by some journalists who actually appeared to commit an accidental act of journalism. And they actually asked him about this Tenino violent sex predator house. Well, Inslee was actually nearby, dedicating a unit for some mental health patients who are being transferred from the now decertified Western State Hospital just south of Tacoma into a small facility at the converted Maple Lane facility in South Thurston County. It's really near me. And Inslee mumbled something about being a Tenino boy because he claims he lived there for a time, and then he claims his violent sex predator release program is just misunderstood. Of course, he couldn't explain why the mental patients were being surrounded by 20-foot chain link fencing at the Maple Lane facility, but the violent sex predators had no such security in their new digs. So exactly how are we misunderstanding this? Now, last week on Thursday at 4:30 p.m., Governor Inslee refused to leave his office to meet the many local residents who showed up at his office, right here, there's a photo of him, for a scheduled time to introduce Inslee to the future child victims of his violent sex predator release program before they could become victims. Now, Inslee didn't want to do that. He also ignored the 2,600 signatures which were submitted by local residents who were opposed to this program. And then, of course, to add insult to injury, just this last Sunday evening, the Thurston County Sheriff had arranged a public meeting at the Tenino High School with the DSHS leadership who's supposedly overseeing this program and the Department of Correction leadership to help explain or justify their program to the community. At the very last minute, these bureaucrats who do actually work for us, even if they don't act like it, they refused to attend the meeting. It's photo of that's right here, claiming that they had heard of some nebulous secret threats against them. Now, I attached their letter in the article link below. And of course, this was a bit ironic since this meeting was hosted by the Thurston County Sheriff's Department. There was going to be a large number of law enforcement officers in attendance at this meeting, and it was being held at a public high school. Now, all schools in Washington State are designated gun-free zones, of course, but obviously these guys don't believe that that program works either. Now, regardless, it was ironic that the same people who didn't feel safe speaking to the public in a very public forum protected by armed police officers in a gun-free zone believe it is perfectly safe to dump the most violent sex predators ever caught by the state into unsecured homes next to children, playgrounds, near campgrounds, families, and school bus stops. Now, does anyone else see that there's something wrong here? Now, in order to completely insult everyone concerned about this issue, these same bureaucrats are actually hosting a remote Zoom-like information program which will require people to actually register before they can log on and attend. And not that I believe these guys care, but that very meeting, the way that it's currently being structured, is a violation of Washington State's Open Public Meetings Act, and I've linked to the relevant laws down below if you want to question me or look at it for yourself. So in all seriousness, it is impossible to parody these guys. They are completely unconcerned about the harm that they knowingly and with full malice plan to inflict on our communities, not just in South Thurston County, but everywhere else in Washington State. Yeah, and I guarantee if you don't live in Washington State, this exact type of program is currently being prepared or may already be happening in your state as well. Now, finally, I want to sort of wrap up the story a bit, just letting you know that things are moving so quickly on this story that I've written a number of articles linked below as well, and I'll continue to do so at wethegovern.com. But I want to just give you some previews of what we expect to cover as we get more documents and verification on the details of this story. And here are the general themes, and we'll expand on these as we kind of unravel this absurd policy and just the ugly details that they're trying to conceal from us right now. Now, first, local residents in Thurston County are concerned that even after they did recently succeed in formally stopping the Tenino location from opening for a variety of health department reasons, lack of a commercial kitchen, inadequate water supply for a commercial operation like this, and inadequate septic facility for a commercial operation like this as well. But we're concerned that Supreme Living, run by Angela Rinaldo, may just ignore the county and start moving violent sex predators into the house anyway. Just take the county fines because the state cash payments are so large that they can easily just afford those fines. Secondly, we discussed how Supreme Living and these other kind of fly-by-night grifting corporations and nonprofits are struggling to hire even marginally qualified people to supervise these violent predators. So they've recently started making cash bonus offers of $500. But they still only require a high school diploma, a valid driver's license, and an adequate 3 days of training to actually manage these guys. It's not a good plan. Now, thirdly, when we reviewed the notice of the first sex predator they plan to dump into the Tenino location, it actually appears that they're exporting this guy from Kitsap County using an order from a Kitsap County judge, and then the formal notice about this guy appears to really water down the violence that he's already committed against women and children, dragging them into bushes as he assaults them and just really terrible crimes. Now, I'm pulling the full criminal file on this guy to compare this to how they actually describe him to the public. And you can then decide if you think these guys are being represented honestly to the rest of us. So finally, I want to highlight the fact that none of these violent predators are being released near Governor Inslee's home or AG Bob Ferguson's home or near the homes of any of the Democrats who sponsored this legislation or even the department heads of these agencies who are dumping them into our community. So listen, if this program was so awesome, as Governor Inslee and AG Ferguson want us to believe, then why did they exempt everyone involved from civil liability? If this was such a good public policy, why are they paying so much to convince shady kind of fly-by-night organizations to actually do the work? And if they cared about saving money, why are they spending at least twice what it currently costs to house these guys? If Inslee and Ferguson and the sponsoring Democrats are so proud of this program, why won't they meet the future victims of these violent predators before they are victimized? Why is everyone involved in this process so secretive and dishonest? And what else exactly are they hiding? Now, right now, nobody can really answer those questions, but with the help of serious and concerned activists around the state, whistleblowers from inside of all these state agencies, and with the crowdsourcing efforts that we're directing at this situation, I'm kind of sure that we will get much more accurate answers shortly. I can't promise anyone that we're going to like the answers we find. And I fully expect this to be uglier and even more slimy than it currently appears. But we can't fix anything if we just look away from it. We have to confront it and expose the truth. Now, fortunately for all of us, while our political leadership and senior bureaucrats may be just completely compromised and corrupted in this situation, I still believe that the future belongs to those who show up. And a lot of people are starting to show up on this one. So share the story widely so that even more people can continue to join us, show up in the near future. We owe it to our children and the most vulnerable in our community, because without us showing up, they don't have much of a chance. Thank you so much for watching.